Okay, let's go. Okay, let's go back to the mitzvah of Boy book and just a few other points I'd like to add. Okay, I think it was clear from a discussion last time that the Ram Mishnah Torah, the Ram over here clearly says, I mean, let's forget in Mishnah Torah, that he says, V'chein eviu raya mitzvah al hachiyu ha'odom lisa bas talmud chacham v'asiu bita v'talmud chacham. So the Ram says the chiyuv, and we pointed out the oddity of this. How can you have an obligation which demographically is impossible? You know, there's not enough. When you talk about, there are enough girls, enough boys going around. What's going on, but if every boy has to marry a bas talmud chacham, or every girl has to marry a talmud chacham, you set up the chin bar of shidduchim to an impossibility. And so one of the things we suggested that it might be a kiyum and not a chiyuv, and lefikoch, like a similar thing the Ram says in Perek Dalet, because it says lefikoch. So maybe we question what's the Ram trying to Ram is lefikoch soch odom lishtadil l'shiyisa. It means he doesn't have to do it; he has to try to do it. So maybe in Mishnah Torah it's not a chiyuv; it's just a kiyum, and not the way he's presenting over here. And all your obligations is shtadil. But the question is, if you and but if you say it's a chiyuv and you don't end up with the bas talmud chacham or the daughters in there with talmud chacham, you have nothing, because if the mitzvah is lidobek b'shchina, so you're not doing business, you're not together with talmud chacham, so you have nothing. The other option is lishtadil, and that's all he has to do. He has to mishtadil. That's the mitzvah. So it makes a lot of sense, because the Torah can't require you to do something which you can't do. The Torah is, the Torah is considerate of people and doesn't tell you to be oil hashamayim. So that makes a lot of sense. But the question is, how is it possible that since the Matorah is lumim ma'aseim, how is it possible that you require your chiyuv just by ishtadlus? So this was the quandary that we left with last week, and it's a very interesting thing. Next. Now, the Ram says, ukfal, so there's a mitzvah, uboy sidbot, ukfal nichpal, zehat sivui, gam kain, v'omo ledofka boy. So there are two cases, the two times in the Torah. It's uboy sidbok, ledofka boy. So, and we pointed out, I think last week, that Ledofka boy, over here, the Ram clearly says that it's a kefo, and in Mishnah Torah, if you read carefully, Perek Vav of Ilchus Deis Halacha Beis, you get the impression that kol minei or kol ifanim of chibur is a separate drasha from the Dovka boy. The Rambam in Perek Vav Halacha Beis, lefikol soch odom l'shtadl shisa bas talmud chacham v'yasi bito l'talmud chacham V'lecho v'lishtois im talmidei chachamim. V'lasa parmadlo talmid chacham u'skaber lohen b'chol minei chibo shenemel ledofka boy. So it's not a it's only an expression of lefikoch of kol minei chibo. And now we pointed out the Ram over here says you learn out kol minei chibo even for boy tidbok. So if you have a dofka boy, then it's a kefo. But according to the Ram Mishnah Torah, you don't learn out kol minei chibo from uboy sidbok. So we understand why he says that you can imagine a dofka boy is not coming for kefo, but it's a kefo for teisef as an union of kol minei chibo. Why he should say this way, not that way, is frankly beyond me. But that's what I see. Now, one could have imagined that Uladovka boy is not a mitzvah b'chal, but it's an eitzah eich yoshim eretz Yisrael. And if you're interested in that, in the way Ebenezer interprets Chuto Shamiko, it's kedai to see the Ebenezer and Dvorim Yud Aleph Chov Beis. But it's clear in Rambam that it's certainly a kefo, or it's a kefo for Tesefes Inyan, or it's a kefo for the Ram quotes in Shows Chi for Tesefes Chumra, that it's a more Chumra Dika Aseh. If the Torah says it twice, that really depends. If there's no other way to go, there's no Tesefes Inyan, then it's a kefo for Chumra. And if the Tesefes Inyan, then you would say that it's not a table of Chumra, it's just to tell you something new. Now, here, there's something interesting I'd like to add, okay? There's a third pasuk in the Torah about like a boy Sid book, and the Ram doesn't mention it at all here or any place. And this is a pasuk in Dvorim Yud Gimel pasuk Hey. Achrei Havaya Elokeichem Telechu v'oisei sirou v'etz mitzvosov tishmoru u'v'koiloi tishmoru v'oisei tavoidu u'bo tidbakun. So you can imagine there's three tzivuyim in the Torah about lidovek b'Hashem. And you would explain that it's also another kefil. And the Ram doesn't quote it over here. So one can maintain that it really is not a kefil. Because this pasuk is quoted right after the Torah is mazhir lishmor lenovi shemisnabe lavor of the sheminabe lavor of the zol. So the pasuk over here is coming to tell you the eitzah of how you don't listen to him. And it's not a kefo. It has nothing to do with boy sidbok. It's the way to protect yourself from a novi who's telling you to ever avodah. And you could have seen it in the really in the Sifri, because the Sifri in the A there in Piska Pehe, Ubo Sidbokun, Hifrishu me'avodah zara, v'dofku b'mokay. The way that you mafresh, you stay away from other zara, is through connecting with God. And the Ramban also says something which would help you in something like this vein. The Ramban in Yural Chof Beis and Dvorim, v'hine zeh k'mo she'oma oid v'oisei tavoda bo tidboku v'akavona lahazir she'lavod Hashem v'zulasoi. In other words, it's not to be over Avodah Zorah, but you shouldn't have God and someone else. And that's the Avodah Zorah. You shouldn't be over. It's not that you're leaving God. You shouldn't be over God and the Avodah Zorah. And that's what he says, the Ramban. V'hinei zeh kamo she'oma oid v'oisei tavodu boi tidbokun v'akavona lahazir she'olavod Hashem v'zulasoi and something else. Elo Lashem levado yavoid b'liboy uvema'asov. And that's what's going on. Uboy tidbokun. V'oisei tavodu uboy tidbokun. And it's going on both. Now, the interesting thing is, so that's the point, and l'chera, the Ramban is putting both oisei tavodu or both tidbokun in the same basket, and the same way both tidbokun is an eitzah. I would have said oisei tavodu is an eitzah. You should just be over God and nothing to do with avodah zarah. You should just be nidbak in God and not in avodah zarah. The interesting, okay, that's where the chayah should come out. And l'chayah, then one should say the oisei tavodu is not a kefil, because we have a mitzvah hey, is a mitzvah of tefillah, which is Avda, and Ram has many different times the Torah says a mitzvah of avodah, and the Ram quotes then all that and says that it's kefil. And the interesting thing over here is there in the mitzvah of tefillah, the Ram quotes oisei savodu as a kefil of the mitzvah avodah. So if that's the case, so and that's a mitzvah hey. So mitzvah vav, if he quotes oisei savodu, it's not an eitzah, but it's a mitzvah. So one could have imagined that he should have said do both tidbokun over here also. Because both of them are written together. So l'chayr, what you should say is that the Rambam doesn't necessarily count all the times that there's a kefil. And v'raya, there's a kefil in the Torah of Shvisa Shabbos. I say Kufnun Dalet, which the Ram says that 12 times in the Torah that there's a kefil. And Shorish Tes, Hine kvar izboye ki lo beribuy alavim o Aseh yirbu ha-mitzvos v'anoida she'atzivu b'Shabbos lo nuach nichpar b'Torah 12 pamim hatire she'yachshiv echod me'asher yimnu ha-mitzvos she'yomer ki mechlal mitzvah Aseh ha-menucha b'Shabbos v'hi 12 mitzvos, and the counted is 12. And the Ram doesn't count when he's talking about in the mitzvah. He doesn't quote all 12. So there's no reason necessarily to say them. So maybe over here he doesn't say all of them. Now, there's one more thing I just wanted to mention. We were asking kashas, and we said that maybe the proof is from the logic that how could you grasp on God? So it must be that you have to grasp on the Talmud Chachamim and to be involved with called pulasam. That's true, okay, but the Rambam, you see, if we're writing our own book called Sefer HaMitzvos, it's a very nice discussion. But the problem is, the Rambam here clearly says that his source, that is a mitzvah of a boy sidbok, and it means to be dovek and tamach chacham, he quotes the Sifri and he quotes the Mon Ksuvas. And as we pointed out, a priori, from the Sifri and the Mon Ksuvas, there's no proof. Because the Sifri says, kilu olisa la shamayim, and it's ki'ilu nidbak b'shchina or something like that, and that's a lashon Mon Ksuvas. So if it's ki'ilu nidbak b'shchina, that's not a lashon mitzvah, it's a chamayla or something like that. So we said that you could have interpreted from the Chiefsha that logically there's a mitzvah or something like that, but that's not what the Ram is quoting. He's quoting the Mon Ksuvas, the ki'ilu and the Sifri. And both of them, if you look at the broader lotion, not the small quote, you don't get the impression there's a mitzvah, and that's very difficult. Now, just like to add something. Yeah. Yeah. There is like this. The truth is, all I was doing is presenting the problems over here, looking through the spectacles of Chazal. The problem is that if someone would have asked me, and I was saying this again and again, and I just say, Baruch Hashem, that I found Masha Libi Chofetz, I found the Ramban and Rabbi Bachaya seeming to suggest the same thing. You see a pasuk boy sidboy, and true, the literal interpretation of sidbok is to cling on to something. But would anyone interpret a pasuk of boy sidbok that the Torah is talking about clinging to God, or a problem? How can you cling to God? So, and especially the Gemara is very odd. Is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Eis Ochla. The problem is because God's fire. Therefore, you cling on till you cling on. If not, we discussed all these problems. But when it says cling on to God, it means intellectually and emotionally you should be intertwined with God. But it's not a physical thing of of Boy Sidbok that you say v'chiyef sheli dobek, but it's hadi dobek v'tamei chachamim. You know, the whole Chazal and the whole logical flow is based on a simple thing. They interpret a Boy Sidbok literally, but I would have said mehechetesek. So I found the Ramban. The Ramban clearly says that this histapkus in HaKadosh Baruch Hu is through machshava. The Ramban in Dvorim Yud Aleph Chav Gimel Yitochen shetichlo hadveka loime shetiye zoicher Hashem v'avosei tomid. You should constantly think about God. And avosei tomid lo tipoi machshavtecha mimenu belechtecha vaderech uv'shach b'chol kumecha. Wherever you are, in whatever situation you are, you should constantly be enraptured with God. Achiu devolve b'nei adam b'fiv u'b'lishaynai. He's talking to them, but really, while he's talking to people, he's really enraptured, intertwined with God. You have a similar thing of Rebbe in Dvorim Yud Gimel Hey. And this is basically the Rambam Mor Nevuchim in Chele Gimel Perik Nun Aleph in the Ha'ara, to always be thinking about God. He talks about the Samali Obis and Moshe and the Moshe Rabbeinu. They're always thinking about God, even though they were involved in mundane tasks. The Rambam talks about Shvis Hashem and Negdi Summit. He doesn't quote this idea of that it's a pshat in the pasuk Boy Sidbok, but the etzim idea exists in the Rambam, and the Ramban says that that's what his tapkus and Hakadosh Baruch Hu is, and that's what it was said. Because you don't have to ask kasha v'chiyevsha and say it means literally, but it means a machshava, and that's what I would have said. Yeah, but if that's the case, then it's a whole different world. Okay. That, I would say, is enough from that is the let's call this mitzvah finished. You know, whatever we did, I just added some things which I hadn't discussed before, which I thought they were very interesting. The Siyum. Now let's go to the Siyum mitzvah Aseh. V'da she'omri b'chol mitzvah kva she'omri b'chol mitzvah kva hisbaru mishpater b'mokor v'ploni ein kavarasi b'zeh she'aperet hahu al mesechta hi tichlo kol mishpater mitzvah hi ad shelo timole mehem she'ela. It's not an exhaustive list. This is a very interesting thing. We don't know exactly what the Rambam is bothered by. He's talking about the ma'amakim he gives at the end of each mitzvah, okay, and where you find it. So why would one expect that the Rambam, the Rambam is doing you a favor to give you ma'amakim, but it has to be the exhaustive list? Avol esko hamokum asher boi ika din mitzvah ahi v'loi mishpateho v'ulayiyu she'elois rabois mi mishpatei mitzvah ahi mefuzoris mekomis acherim min haTalmud v'loi esko mekoimom ato. And okay, so we don't understand what the Rambam wants over here. It's a very, very difficult paragraph. It's like he's apologizing for something we don't know why he has to apologize for. Okay. You know, mehechtesa yishaf dusristei. Ushetichlo kol elu hamitzvos shekodam zichrom. Hine timsa mehem mitzvos shehem chos. Now he's going about to trying to organize different types of mitzvahs. There are mitzvahs which are choyves sibur. Loi l'chol ish v'ish. Or yochid v'yoch. It's not individuals, it's on the community. Kagoin, Beis HaBechira, Hakomas Melech, V'achros HaZaroi Shel HaMolech. So there's no mitzvah, according to the Rambam, of killing Amalek except as part of a tzibur. And, you know, maybe the Rambam is deriving this from the Gemara Sanhedrin of Chof, V'chein Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Chof Omebeis, Sholosh Mitzvos Tavo Yisrael. It means the tzibur as a whole, B'knisas La'oretz Lahamid Melech, Lahachris Zaroi Shel HaMolech. This is based on Bechira. So what the Rambam is doing is interpreting Sholosh Mitzvos Tavo Yisrael. He's a mitzvah tzibur, and he's paraphrasing it and quoting it over here. Umehem mitzvah shehem choyves liish miyuchad, for special type of people, not everyone. Imosapula plonis ad shimsu or inyan aploni or ad shimsu. In other words, he either if he does X, then he's chayiv in the mitzvah, or if it's a matzav Y, then he's the chayiv in the mitzvah. To go korban shogeg, if he was over aver b'shogeg, or if it is a matzah of azov, the korban azov. Upamim yamoid echod min anoshim kol yemei chayav, v'lo yasa pulahi, v'lo yimsu inyan. He won't be in that matzah. We won't do the pula. He won't be chayav korban shogeg, and he won't be chayav korban azav. Ume'ela mitzvos gam kein. Now here's interesting. The mitzvahs called dinim, kamo shebi alma, kamo din eved ivri, v'din omevriya, which the truth is, there's no din omevriya, that that's a problem, because in Mina Mitzvos he calls Omevri and Amar, Mitzvah Regilo, and here he calls it a Shrano or a Din. I'm not. The question is the Rambam bedafka that it's a din, or the Rambam really just wants to tell you that it's not clear at all that any one individual should be chayiv in tayag mitzvahs, like the din evet knani, the din shoymas chinom, din shoyel. Not everyone's a shoyel. V'zulasi ma shekodem zichom yitochin she'amoid echol min anoshim gam kein kol yimei chayiv lo yishpoit b'zeh v'lo tischayiv loy ha-mitzvah zeis. Okay. Now, next. Umehem gam kein. Mitzvahs she'ein noigois el b'fnei habayis. V'gon chagiga v'ri'iyah u'mitzvahs hakel. Okay. Chagiga v'ri'iyah mitzvahs hakel. U'kvar zochum achas achas. So the Rambam doesn't mention over here, for example, Pesach and Chatos, because his kavanah is not to give an exhaustive list. Okay, but it's more than that, okay? Because the Rambam, I would say, like he's adding new ones. She says, I'm reading towards the end of the Akdama to Minyan HaMitzvos, right before the beginning of the Minyan. Ulefi shekol inyonim halolu mufuksosim eitz aloiv kol mitzaseh oiloisaseh hatluya bikobonois o ba'avoidois o b'mises bezdin o b'senhedrin o b'novi v'melech o b'milchomet mitzvah o mechemes rishus lo itztach loima bohen umitzvah zu ein noheges el b'fnei abayis kiven shezeh bogo kefi ma sheizkalnu. So the is very clear, and he mentions it before also. So he doesn't have to mention Korbanos, and why he goes out of his way here to mention like Chagiga and Ria is very odd. He says another paragraph before this a little bit. B'chein kasher askir es ha-mitzvah she'eno choyvos ela be'eretz Yisrael o b'fnei abayis bein sho yaseh lo yisaseh oy mezeh eno choyva ela be'eretz Yisrael o b'fnei abayis b'chein yodua shekol kabonos einen krevim ela b'mikdosh u'she'en avoida muteres michutz la'azor b'chein dinin lefoshas ein donen oisem ela mitzias ha-mikdosh. So the Chayyim is talking about Bnei Abayis. So he says it very clearly. So what he has to add over here that about Chagiga and Riyah, so I can imagine Hakil, maybe it depends upon Bayis. Chais. I didn't think about before. Okay, say it. Next. Umehen Gamkein. Lo nischayvu elami sheyesh loy nachlois. Nachlois is a very bad. This is Ibn Tibbon's translation, a very poor translation. L'chayra, it's better to say kinyonim. That's Ibn Eoy. He has orchush. He has assets. So what assets could go in a miceless? He has fields and he has four growing. So he's chayv miceless. And that's Aseh, Kuf Nun Zayin, Kuf Chaf Zayin, Kuf Chaf Ches, and Kuf Lamed. Or Vatrumais, that's Truma Gedola, and Trumas Maisa, Kuf Chaf Vav, and Kuf Chaf Tes. Vamatonois, Vamatnis Kuna, that's Kuf Chaf He, Kuf Lamed Gimel, Kuf Mem Dal, and Kuf Mem He. V'chukei ha'aniyim, v'tzoloi ma'aleket, v'aperet, v'ashikha, v'apeya, v'oilois, all the different mitzvahs. Kuf Chaf Aleph, Kuf Chaf Dalet, Kuf Chaf Beis, and Kuf Chaf. And Kuf Chaf Gimel. But he says, it's again a case that you won't have any one single individual chayv tayag mitzvahs. Upon lo yiu loy oisam hakinyonim lo yischayv lehem v'yamoid hoish kol yemei chayav lo yischayv mitzvah min ha-mitzvahs shehein mizeh hamin. Oh, but he says be'einat stoka min haklal zeh because the Gemara says the mechuyev even onem ispanas min stoka is mechuyev stoka ki hi mechuyev afilu li'oni ha-mispanas min stoka. Okay. So that's okay. That's the Rambam in Matnas Aniyim. Perik Yizayin Aloch Aleph and Hey, Mitzvah say Litain Stokol Aniyim. וכולי לעולם לא ימנע עצמו מן השלישס השקל בשנה. כל נושאים פוחז מזה לוקים מצווה. ואפילו עוני, המספרנס מן הצדוקה, חייב ליתן צדוקה לאחר. Okay, that's very clear. Now, we're coming to the point. So that was that one person not chayiv, and in different situations, I'm a chayiv, different not, and it depends upon your situation, depends upon your chush, it depends upon your matzav, whatever he's talking about, if you are a zav or not. Those two all different options. And some things are on the tzibor. Next. Umehem mitzvos mischayvim l'chol ish behechach, that everyone is involved in it. Bal koch. So it goes like this. B'chol zman b'chol mokoim be'eze yishiyah kagoyin hatzitzis. That's Aseh Yudalit, which really is not behechach, because we have dalit begodim, the dalit conference in his beged. But the Ram says over here, and we'll see later, that he doesn't mean that you're chayiv in the Bal Kocha. It means normal people have such begodim and they're chayiv. Person lives a normal life. We'll explain it later in the next paragraph. See the next paragraph. B'chol zman b'chol mokoim be'eze inyan shiyeh. We're going at tzitzis, v'atfilin. Tzitzis Aseh Yudalid. Tfilin is Aseh Yud Beis and Yud Gimel. Shmiras Shabbos, Shomo is Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsher. Shomo is the mitzvah of Tishbos, of the mitzvah of Shvis Shabbos, Shmiras Shabbos. V'nikra mitzvah shehein mizeh amin, ha-mitzvah is hechrechios, because you have to do them. Mipenei shehein mischayvos l'chol ish shegiya lepirkum Yisrael. Any man who is reached, his majority is reached by mitzvah, is chayiv in these mitzvahs. Mehem shishim mitzvah. There's the Ram is listed 60 mitzvahs, and that the obligation is on everyone. And it doesn't depend on a matzav and rechush and that you did a certain pula or whatever. Or ubetnai shoish amanu shechai be'ela shisha mitzvah chechis shinyono ke'inyan roiv shroiv b'nei adam. He's like most people, normal people. Hechach doesn't mean hechach. It means that if he is like most people, he'll be willy-nilly be chayiv in 60 mitzvahs. V'hu shiyeh oimed b'bayis b'medina. He lives in a house and he lives among people. He's not a hermit. V'yocha ma'cholim. How you doing the mazon adam? He eats what people normally eat, which is what? What's loy ma'alechem v'abosa. V'yases schayra. And he also does business in b'nei adam. V'yisa isha. And he gets married. V'yolid. And then you have all these mitzvahs in 60 minutes. So now let's go. So here, it might be an interesting issue, but the Ram doesn't explain which mitzvahs depend upon bosa and lechem, which mitzvahs depend upon being in Medina, which mitzvahs depend upon bayis, which mitzvahs depend upon schayim b'nei adam. So there is a tshuva from Yeshua Nogid that goes through and tries to ascertain the list. But since it's not the Rambam, and to deal with it, the Eskash is why he says this one is, this one's not. I'm not sure that that's to our best of the best use of time, because our interest is to explain the Rambam, and not necessarily, in other words, there's no clarity that the Rambam might have interpreted like him. But if you're interested, it's the Tshuvas of the of Yeshua Nogi. So now goes like a mitzvah Rishona. That's the mitzvah Leida Shei Shomer Elokah. The mitzvah Shniya is, and that is hechach for everyone, is liachta yichor Hashem. Gimel Ashlishis is Avo. Levius is Yiro, Mimenu, and Chamishis is Lispalo. Is avoid means Lispalo lo Yisalo. Now, the Rambam is going to say that every mitzvah of these 60, he's going to tell you which mitzvah Noshim are not chayiv. Women are chayiv in almost all of them, but they're 14, whatever I'm going to list them one after the next. The women are potter. But when it comes to tefillah, the Ram does not say ein anoshim chayav. So it means women are chayiv in the mitzvah tefillah. So the question is, maybe it's mitzvah shes man grom. So to ask this question in Minyan Mitzvos doesn't make any sense, because the Ram doesn't say you're chayiv to pray every day, or doesn't talk about any zmanim. You're chayiv to pray. Well, it's one time in your life, well, we don't know nothing. But Mishnah Torah, where he says b'chol yoim, maybe you should say it's a mitzvah seishes man gromo. So here from the Rav once that he said from father, the mitzvah seishes man gromo is like the you could only imagine if there's a zman p'tur, but if you're always chayiv and the chiyuv constantly changes, that would mitzvah seishes man gromo. And in tefillah, you're always chayiv. It's just this day is not chayiv this day, but there's no interim period you're potter, so you can't call it mitzvah seishes man gromo. That's what he said. And maybe that's what the Rambam meant in Mishnah Torah, in Perek Aleph, maybe Aleph or Beis, where he says, the ain, he says like this. Let's read the whole thing. Perek Aleph, Aleph Beis, mitzvah say, lispalel, b'chol yoim, ve'ein l'tfilah zman kavua min ha'Torah, ve'ein l'tfilah zman kavua min ha'Torah. Lefikach, noshim avodim, chayom b'tfilah, lefishi mitzvah say, shalom gangoma. So maybe it's only because ve'ein l'tfilah zman kavua min ha'Torah. But it's all the time. It's just maybe each day is a new chiyuv. Okay, so that is what I heard. Now, next, that's 5. 6 is Vashishis, is Ledovka boy. Shvius, Lishova B'Shmo. Shminis is Lidomos B'Drochov. That's Volach B'Drochov. Chiis is Kiddush Hashem. Asiris is Likol Kriyishma Pamayim B'Chol Yoim. Alvis is Shachris. Then is V'Achas Esrei. V'Higam Kein Ein Enoshim Chayeves Bo. That's Lumot Torah Lamdo. Then Hashtem Esrei is Liksha Tfilin Beloish. V'higam kein ein anosh chayav bo. V'ashleish Esrei v'higam kein ein anosh chayav bo. This is Tfilin Shel Yad. Or Ba Esrei is Sitzis. Las is Sitzis. And ve'en anosh chayav bo. Women are chayav mit Sitzis. V'chamesh Esrei is L'kvoy Mezuzah. Now, Hashmona Esrei, Vihi Ein Anosh Chayav Bo. So what Shmona Esrei? That's Lichtev Sefer Torah. So this is very important. And what it means is, it's very clear from the Rambam, that the Mitzvah Sefer Torah is B'chlal. This Mitzvah which is Noig B'zman Aseh. And everyone has to write a Sefer Torah, except for women. But the Gemara Kedushin, the Flamen of an Olive, said Shein or Bekin, B'chseis Yiseres. And the Rambam says that if you mess up Chseis Yiseres, it's a psul the Sefer Torah. In Uchas Tfilin Mezuzah of Sefer Torah, Perek Zayin Aloch Yud Aleph, Avo Im Kosav Hamole Choser or Choser Mole Harizeh Posel V'Ein Bo Kedusha Sefer Torah Klau El Chumash Min HaChumashim Shemalamdim Bo Hatiloikais. So if that's the case, we could ask, how are you actually carrying the mitzvah? So the Rambam is of the opinion that if you're matik, you Sefer Torah from a Sefer Meduyuk, I guess you're okay. And that's exactly where the Rambam wrote his Sefer Torah. As the Rambam says in Sefer Torah, Perek Ches Aloch Adalet, V'olav hoyu hakol seimchin, Sefer Ben Osher, Ulefi shegiu Ben Osher, the diktik by Shonim Harbe, V'giu Pam Rabois, and that's a Sefer Torah that Rambam used. And if you look in the Shiur Bracha, in Yodei Simulation Ayin Sivkot Beis, he pretty much says this and explains it even more. Halava Niska Shom Simula Midvov Kosav the Ein Mitzvos Ato Min HaTorah. There's no Daraisa Mitzvah Ksiva Sefer Torah. The Ein Bekim B'Chseis Yiseres. And the Rabbanan Chayovim V'Minicho Lo Yavoisav Ein Tzorach Lichtoi Umasik the Gam Mid Rabbanan Botla Mitzvah Ksiva Sefer Torah. Mitam Shagayin Barosh. In Hilchos Sefer Torah, Siman Aleph, because people will see the Rosh's approach. V'liya Hedjit Nira the Chi the Haram Ram Zal Torach Me'ed V'holach Me'eva Leyam L'mokel Shoyet Shem Sefer Torah Shekosav Ezra Novi U'mishom Hetik V'gam Horav Ma'aram Ben Li Nazir no Hifli La'aseis B'Sefer Or Torah Me'ato HaKoyze Sefer Torah Das Rambam B'Sefer Or Torah Mekayim Mitzvah Semen HaTorah V'chein Rabbeinu Ari Zal Tzimo Lichtov Loi Sefer Torah Al Das Rambam V'tizge Lo She'arambam Umoron B'Shulchan Aruch Kosul Mitzvos Aseh Lichtov Sefer Torah V'afilu Hinichu Loi Avoso. Okay, beseder. So if you have a Sefer Meduyuk, But Tachas Adiktok, even though the Gemara Babli says we're not poking Chseres Yiseres, I guess you can be kind of the mitzvah. That's what Ram says. According to the Rosh does something which is very odd. He says the mitzvah is Lichter Kedel Lamdo. He quotes the Apostle Lamdas B'nai Yisrael. He says, Bizman Azeh, since we don't learn with the Sefer Torah put in the base of Knesset, the mitzvah is to buy small. Hilchus Ktanis Lolosh, Siman Aleph. The Shagas Aye in the Shonas discusses this in Siman Lamed Vav. He discusses the Rosh's Chiddush, and there were not no book in Chseus Yiseres, but in the Rambam, there's no mention of the Rosh's Chiddush, and the Beis Yosef Yodei Siman Reish Ayin you also don't. Now, the interesting thing is, and this I'll share with you, there are differences between the Sefer of Ben Osher and our Sefer Torah. For example, in Bereshis, Perek Tes, towards the end of Pashas Noach, Pasuk Chof Tes. In Ben Osher, it's written by Yihiyu, Kol Yemei Noach. However, in our Sefer Torah, it's written by Yihi, Kol Yemei Noach. And Minchas Shai says there's a machlokes atika in this over there in Bereshis. And there are also differences in Chseres Yiseres between our Sefer Torah and Ben Osher. It is also there's a the people relate a story, whether it's true or not, is that the Beis Yosef actually sent the Hatokah of the Sefer Torah of Ben Osher to the Ramah, and he wrote a Sefer Torah with that. And this Sefer Torah was in Krakow until Hey Tufshin Beis. That is Sefer Torah, and the Ram is saying you can kind of mitzvah. And that's V'abayisrei, v'hi gam kein lo shechayovas bo. V'chameshesrei is Chameshesrei. I'm sorry, mezuzah and lo shechayovas bo. Chayesrei is Sefer Torah, correct? Chayesrei is Sefer Torah, and then Sheish v'esrim. 1 second, 59. I'm sorry. Hachayesrei. 1 second. Shmona Esrei is Ksiva Sefer Torah. I'm sorry. Okay. Chayesrei is Bikas Hamozin. Sheish v'esrim is Bikas Kohanim. And the mitzvah is on Kohanim Escholim. V'zu miyuchedes v'zichekuna. Not Nekevis. The mitzvah is the Vorches Yisrael. As the Ram Minyan Mitzvah says also. But this is not like the Charedim in Mitzvah say. Perek Daled, Mitzvahs say Perek Daled, Ois Yutches, that the part of the mitzvah is for the Israel to oimid ponu keneged ponu l'fnei hakohanim ulekabel b'chosam. Is also b'chal mitzvah. It's a big chiddush. The Israel is also b'chal. The Ram seems to say the mitzvah is only on kohanim, which is mistaba. Next, Hashtayim V'Shleishim is Lacha Koven Lezar Shel Aaron L'Atim L'Chol Davar Shebekdusha. The Rambam seems to learn this mitzvah is a hechechiyos, even though there's no avodah, because the Rambam holds that this mitzvah is noeg b'zman hazeh, shaloi b'fnei habayis. It might be interesting to look over the Bach in your day, Simchav Ches, and to understand, how the Ramban, the Bach is spinning this issue. But the Rambam is very clear about it, that the mitzvah midiraisa is noeg even b'zman hazeh. Next, the small Golim. There are two parts. That's the mitzvah of Arba v'Chamishim, 52, and 54. 54 is the small Golim, and the two chalakim the mitzvah. There's a chelik of Basar Chilus Kochim, which is not noeg b'zman hazeh. And there's a small the sameich and dvom mesamchim beyontiv shenoigis manazeh. And that which is hechre is that which is noig b'zmanazeh is the dvom mesamchim each lefi every oil. Achilles kochim is noig only if they are biased. But everything else, the other things that which are also b'chal mitzvah are noig b'fnei habayis. Okay, I guess no shemachayim here. V'asholish v'asholish v'shivim, which is vidui, which is noig b'zman hazeh. V'arba v'tishim is the mitzvah of L'kayim odom ma she'oitz b'svosav b'korban v'tzvokah ki yoitz b'zeh. That's our v'tishim. V'asholish v'arboim umeya. That's the mitzvah of litein min habehemo l'koyin zor v'chayim b'kemo. Then Vashesh v'arboim umeya. Sheva boim umeya. I assume there's Kisi Adam, Livdok b'simone behemo, and Livdok b'simone oif, and Livdok b'simone dogim. He doesn't mention chagovim, I guess, because not everyone eats chagovim, but I guess they can eat all different types of things, whatever. So, okay. So, the Ram is going to say at the end over here, I just wanted to say something. Oh, no, okay. We'll pick up Mitzvah Shamblina next time.